my machines.
Mario, how did you avoid becoming a postmodernist? How did you avoid becoming a postmodernist?
I've never been modern, and so
So you can't be postmodern.
I didn't need to become postmodern.
You looked modern. You looked very modern. I mean, you know, to me it seems that one of the things that Italy did do in the Miracolo years was it had to make its products look different. It was competing with the giants outside, and it had to say, look at us, we're doing something special and different. And to me, what you were doing was making things that looked very much of their time, very much fresh, very much the idea of a kind of fresh start, which to me is one definition of modernity.
Yes, I was joking a bit, but I could add that being Italian, I never had the complex of looking back to the classical times as to a lost dimension. We are living together with Roman ruins and classical cities, a lot of towns with the so-called historical centers and so and so and so. So eventually most of us do not need to dream about this classical ancient time, like it is easier for an American architect, which at a certain moment could feel the desire to restate times of before, the past times against these modern, boring boxes, you know.
You know, the cab chair has been in production for, what, 50 years almost? And
30,
sorry, yeah.
Going to the 35, which
some
is
decades.
a lot already.
And it still looks without time, but if you look back at those wonderful Olivetti products you made, they were in production for maybe 2 or 3 years, and now they're almost as far in the past as the Stone Age, and yet they're still very beautiful. They must be very sad things to look back at.
You're absolutely right. I always say that when you look to an old photo of the 30s with, let's say, Corbusier building and contemporary of those years car, you see the car old, and the architecture still fresh, totally modern, maybe still of an achieved modernity, because it's still to go. Still to be understood.
And you see a woman in a dress that looks incredibly old. But
incredibly old, yes.
So strange. Yes.
And that's what you were saying. Machines age, they come from a wilder dimension, and they age very fast.
In the 80s, the whole idea of this technology is something that was way ahead of us, and you could do anything. Was that the kind of feeling when you were working on the typewriter? Was it technology is there to be manipulated? You're free in a way. You have the problem of editing it, or?
To tell you the truth, I wasn't so much interested in technologies. I was using technologies. Of course, technology is, if I may say that, it's such a stupid thing. You can learn it very fast. And the day after is old. It might change. So you have to understand the technology to understand technology. Once you did that, then technology is a mean. It's terrible when you worship technology as something which would save you. And I remember when designing a machine, my first point was the concept, was the why, not how to produce it.
And one of the things that always strikes me that's special about Italy, if we try and think why it's so special, is that there was that combination of craft skills, which they kept from a long way back, combined with that interest in new technologies. It wasn't one or the other. It was both.
Yes, of course. For example, the first of those companies with whom I entered in touch was Cassina. And Cassina was exactly an example of that. Cassina started, if I remember well, in the 40s, with Gioponti.
They were supplying things to ships, weren't
because
they, at the
yes,
beginning?
the shipyards
Yeah.
needed a lot of furniture to be designed. They started there, eventually with Gioponti, and then they started calling Carlo Scarpa, and then Tobias Scarpa, and then Magistretti, a little bit Zanuso for sometimes,
Gardella, I think, a
and myself, and so and so. And I remember that the climber in Cassina was, in a way, to use new technologies. On the other way, to care about the perfect handicraft. At the point that if something was wrong after 5 years, they were ready to have back the upholstered piece and or redo it or change it free, because it was unacceptable it to be not perfect even 5 years later. I remember them making a show, throwing the Superleggera, the Gioponti chairs, down from the second floor, the very thin wood chairs, you know, and jumping on the courtyard with on one leg and jumping up without breaking, to show how well all the joinery was done, down to the minimum amount of wood.
I think it's true to say that that was characteristic of quite a lot of the designers working in that era, that they were architects. People like Zanuso and Sottsass and others, they trained as architects in the 1930s, I suppose.
Yes,
quite a few of them.
Albini, Gardella, Gioponti,
Sure.
yeah, Zanuso, Magistretti, Cacciadominioni, and so on. They were all the famous modern architects in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and they were all doing design as well, mostly furniture design, and Zanuso industrial design as well, with
Yes.
Richard Sapper and so. And that can be seen as a strange condition in Italy, but I like to say that it was probably strange after the war, but it wasn't strange in the early 20th century, when all the major modern architects, they were at the same time designer. To name a few, Corbusier, Mackintosh, Aalto, Rietveld, Hoffman, and
Very
so on. So
true.
they all were doing what we started doing, went on doing after the war. While in Europe and the United States, what I call the reorganization of the professions based on a neo-capitalistic concept divided the profession, at the point that when I went around in Europe or in the States I was an architect, but at the same time I was a designer. At the beginning, they thought they were two brothers, you know.
Yes.
And when I restarted doing architecture, I had for a while to suicide myself as a designer to be trustable. And to design a chair is sometimes much more difficult than to design a skyscraper. Because most of the time, a skyscraper can remember a presse-papier. Is easily done. You do a nice shape. And then you can give it to an engineering team to develop all the boring problems like structure,
Make it stand out.
elevators, and you know,
Bathrooms.
bathrooms, things like that. I'm true, because I also have designed skyscrapers, and I know it takes much longer. I mean, if you're able to design 5 important chairs in your life, that's very, very, very difficult. But you can design 50 nice skyscrapers, 200 nice skyscrapers in your life.
Is that because there's nowhere to hide with a chair? Everything is visible.
Everything is visible, and the chair is kind of weird by indossata, how do you say? Wearing. When you put a jacket over it. Worn.
Worn, you wear
It's
a chair.
worn by a human being. And it is not a tool chair. A chair is something which melts with your body, which has always got something sacred inside you. I mean, a human being is a human being. And a human being sat on a wrong chair looks ridiculous. And it is, I mean, it's an unbelievable object. And I used to say to architects, tell me which chair you're able to design, I will say something about you as an architect.